Hi, my name is Tane, and in this video I'm going to show you how to inspect a rainfall site. The first step when you arrive on site is to go and check the totals recorded on the logger. This is the amount of rain that has fallen since you were last at the site. So the next step is to inspect the check gauge. The first thing to do is to use the dipstick to take a measurement of how much water is in the check gauge. Carefully lower the dipstick in till it reaches the bottom, hold it there for a second or two, and slowly pull it out. Have a look where the water comes up to on the dipstick and record that measurement. Next, we're going to empty the check gauge into the flask. The flask we use is only 50 mils, so you'll have to do multiple readings. If you've got a second pair of hands, ask them to hold the flask steady while you pour the water in. Otherwise, find a nice stable flat surface to place the flask on. It is important that we don't lose any water out of the flask, as this is our check against the dipstick. Once you've emptied all of the check gauge into the flask, place the check gauge back into its outer and put the lid on top. The next step is to inspect the intensity gauge. To do this, there are 3 screws that hold the shell onto the base of the tipping bucket. There are a few checks to work through. The first is to make sure that the tipping bucket is level, a little bubble level on the base of the tipping bucket, and just assure that this is aligned in the circle. The second check is to ensure that there's no blockages. Check that it's clean and clear of any small debris. And lastly, you're going to do 6 test tips. The test tips are done by pouring water through the top of the funnel and allowing the bucket to tip itself 6 times. Put the shell back on and do up the screws. It is important to note that you don't over tighten these screws, as they can actually change the shape of the orifice ever so slightly, and the orifice being the top rim of the intensity gauge. A battery check is key to compare the voltage of the battery on site to the voltage reading that the logger has recorded. To do this, take the multimeter, ensuring that the correct settings have been applied. You'll want to be reading DC voltage and select a range that is appropriate for the battery setup. In most cases, this will be around 13 volts. Hold the red cable on the positive terminal on the battery and the black on the negative. Read the voltage and take note. Now read the voltage of the logger and record this value. The last step on site is to reset the totals. And finally, before you leave, a little bit of site maintenance is really important. We need to make sure that there's no vegetation growing up that could potentially block the rain and not allow the rain to fall into our sensors and to capture that data. If you are unsure at any stage of this process, feel free to reach out, as we are more than happy to help. If you'd like to know more about rainfall recording, the best resource is the NEMS rainfall recording document. This can be accessed on the NEMS website. Currently, the latest version 2.1 was released in August 2017. Thanks for following along to learn how to inspect a rainfall site. Ngā mihi, Tane.